Drinking alcoholic beverages is banned in Islam in accordance with the 19th and 91st verses of the Surah Ma'idah in the Quran. Defying this command was considered a sin, thus was incorporated into the Sharia Islamic law. But drinking alcohol, drinking alcohol and drunkenness were not the same in the eyes of Islamic authorities. For instance, according to Abu Hanifa, who was the founder of the Hanafi school of Sunni Islam, which dominated the Ottoman legal system, drunkenness was a confused state of mind in which the drunk person could not distinguish earth from sky and a woman from a man. It was this state of confusion and lack of clarity that rendered a person truly drunk, an offense which required hot corporal punishment. Despite the fact that there was this distinction between being drunk and drinking alcohol in Islamic jurisprudence, Ottoman court practices from early modern Istanbul show us that this distinction between drinking alcohol and drunkenness was not an established or clearly defined one. Indeed, in the estimation of the court, the simple act of drinking wine made the drinker sarhoş, drunk. A word in Turkish literally means good, nice head, without requiring any further investigation into or need to understand the state of the mind of the person under investigation. The only requirement was to prove that this particular person had imbibed wine. Hence, the practice of smelling the breath of the accused to see whether there was or was not scent of wine, raiha-i hamr. This alone being sufficient to prove not only the act of drinking alcohol, but also of being drunk. Therefore, the concept of drunkenness in the Ottoman court and the concept of drunkenness in Islamic jurisprudence were not identical. Further, the Ottoman court practice in relation to drunkenness and the reality of drunkenness in Ottoman society did not always overlap either. One should also note here that in Ottoman Kanunnames, imperial codes of laws, sultans specified punishment only for drinking wine without elaborating on drunkenness. For instance, Murat III, who reigned between 1574 and 1595 in his Kanunname, ordered qadis, judges, to impose corporal punishment, bastinado, which could be converted into cash fine, 2 strokes for 1 akçe, without specifying how many strokes should be administered per crime, leaving this decision up to the judicial discretion of the individual judge. In order to develop this point, I want to look at a few court cases from 16th and 17th century Istanbul. The first case is from the Üsküdar Kadı Court Register and is dated 1584. Üsküdar is an urban area on the Asian shores of Bosphorus. A Janissary, Bekir, son of Abdullah, who was a yasakçı, a state-appointed security guard, took a case to the Kadı court. In court, he declared that he had received news that some Levants, irregular Ottoman soldiers, had brought a female prostitute to the Arpacı Hüseyin Keravansarayi, taking with him 4 Muslim men, Mehmet bin Abdullah, Şaban bin Abdullah, Ferruh bin Abdullah, and Hüseyin bin Hassan. He organized a raid on this location. So you can see this raid scene from a very much a later manuscript. By the time the group reached its destination, the man and the woman had escaped, leaving behind some clothing, including 2 old soft felt caps, 1 old shirt, 1 jacket, and a turban. After, I quote, quite an uproar, close quote, 2 men still fully clothed and a woman named Fatima bint Mehmet, Fatima, daughter of Mehmet, were caught and brought to the court. Yasakçı Bekir and his partners accused the woman of still being drunk as evidenced by the scent of wine in her mouth. I'm quoting. Ağzında ra'i ham. The Kadı accepted this accusation by pointing out that the woman, I quote, has no power left to plead not guilty, as her drunkenness was proved by the scent of wine on her breath. The woman was then handed over to the Süveyşi, the police superintendent, presumably for punishment. As can be seen very clearly from this case, Ra'i ham, the scent of wine, was taken as absolute proof of drinking alcohol and of drunkenness. In some cases, though, the scent of wine as proof of drinking alcohol was sufficient grounds for conviction without pressing charges over drunkenness. A 50 case earlier than the case involving the Yasakçı Bekir, Ali Bali bin Mustafa was accused in the same court, Üsküdar court, of drinking wine in the holy month of fasting Ramazan by Cabi Hacı, a collector of revenue of a pious foundation, Vakıf. Ali denied this accusation. In such cases, the plaintiff, here is Cabi Hacı, had to prove that the accused, here Ali, had drunk wine. To support his claim, Cabi Hacı produced two witnesses, Mufsir Mustafa bin Mehmet and Hasan bin Hüseyin, who confirmed that Ali's mouth smells, there is the scent of wine, close quote. The Kadı ruled that Ali had drunk wine and registered this decision in front of 6 more witnesses. In this case, Ali was not accused of being a drunk but of drinking wine. His offense of drinking wine was in this instance a heavier crime due to circumstance. That Ali had imbibed wine in Ramazan, a month where all the religious offenses were magnified in the eyes of the authorities, and the heaviest penalties were imposed on those who drank alcohol, who dallied with unrelated women or prostitutes, or those who created public disturbances. The infallibility of Ra'i Hamr, the scent of wine, as evidence of drinking wine was expanded beyond the precept laid down by Abu Hanifa to become accepted as absolute proof of drunkenness. A case from the mid-17th century, Kadı Court of Hasköy, a settlement near Haliç, the Golden Horn, on the European side of Bosphorus, proves this point very clearly. Here, a Janissary Yusuf, who was one of the commanders of Hasköy, had caught Ayşe bint Veli, Ayşe daughter of Veli, from Fener Kapısı, drinking wine in the company of a couple of unrelated men. Ayşe's male companions managed to slip away, while Ayşe was seized and accused of being drunk. But Ayşe did not accept this accusation. The religious figures of the quarter, the muezzin, the man who calls Muslims to prayer, Sinan bin Abdullah, and the imam, the preacher, Ahmet bin Cafer, gave evidence against Ayşe, saying that, quoting, she has the scent of wine in her mouth, close quote. So without need of further proof, Ayşe's crime was recorded. Although Ayşe was in the company of unrelated men, they had managed to escape, leaving Yusuf able only to take her to court on the allegation of drunkenness, not on any other charges related to her being in the company of unrelated men. Although Ayşe was confident enough to deny the accusation of being drunk, the declaration by 2 respected figures that her mouth smelled of wine was considered sufficient to bring about her conviction for drunkenness. The quick and easy method of smelling the scent of wine on a person's breath was also used in the case of Yusuf bin Abdullah, dated 1536. The Üsküdar Emini, the superintendent of Üsküdar, Mustafa, went to court accusing Yusuf having, I quote, fought and drunk wine, close quote. While the Emin did not produce witnesses against Yusuf to substantiate these accusations of violence, the odor of Yusuf's breath was sufficient to prove the offense of drunkenness. Since I quote, his mouth was sniffed, and indeed he was drunk. He was registered as guilty on the request of the Subaşı police superintendent. As in the case of Ayşe, who had been in the company of unrelated males, but who was condemned on the count of drunkenness, here too, it was not Yusuf's disorderliness, but imbibing of alcohol, which was used to ensure his conviction. What brought about the punishment of Yusuf, therefore, was his consumption of wine, not his violent behavior. Thus, the reason for punishment was related to his religious offense, which in turn rested on his Muslim identity. Considering that Ottoman society was multi-religious and that Istanbul in particular, an urban monster in the words of Brodel, was a very cosmopolitan metropolis, due in part to the nature of the city as one of the largest commercial settlements of the early modern world, a large segment of the Ottoman population, that is of course the non-Muslims, was permitted to drink alcohol, to produce alcohol and sell alcohol. Further, the state benefited financially such activity, for it imposed alcohol, in particular wine, which brought revenue into state coffers. Around the same time as the first case involving the Yasakçı Bekir in 1583, again in Üsküdar, the Subaşı police superintendent Fahri Lakran Müslihiddin and Lütfi Bey, a respectable man, as can be understood from his title and job as one of the scribes of the Imperial Pious Foundation, brought two Muslim women, Fatima bint Abdullah and Emine bint Abdullah, both converts, as you can be seen from their names, because Abdullah is very much a convert suffix, sorry, and a non-Muslim man, Mihal Kodosh, Mihal the pimp, together with a leather bottle of wine to the court. It transpired that Subaşı Müslihiddin and Lütfi Bey had received news that the women were drinking wine and having sexual encounters with some Bostancı Acemi oğlans, junior imperial guards. Once they arrived at the scene, a fight broke out and the guards attacked the Subaşı and his companion before running off, leaving their knives behind them. The Subaşı and Lütfi Bey, however, were only able to seize Nihal and the woman and took them to the court. In the court, the women were accused of still being drunk, as, I quote, they have the scent of wine in their mouths and they are drunk, close quote. The woman accepted this accusation and further confessed that they had come to meet up with the guards named Ahmet and Hüseyin with the purpose of adultery. The Qadi then sentenced this woman as being drunks and prostitutes, while Nihal was convicted as their associate. It is apparent that Nihal was accused of being the woman's pimp, but that the women were accused of both being prostitutes and drunks. Although Nihal the pimp had to indulge in drinking wine during this escapade, unlike two Muslim women, he was not accused of being drunk and was not subjected to a breath test. Indeed, his non-Muslim identity spared him from any accusation of such offense. For drinking and following the logic of the cases examined, presumably also being drunk, for a non-Muslim was permissible. Perhaps such permissibility was what misguided an imperial guard, Silahtar Mehmet, who appeared before the court in 1586. This time, our case is from Amasya, a town in the northern part of Anatolia. Mehmet had gone to the court in a drunken state and had declared that, I quote, I am an infidel, therefore drinking wine is religiously permissible for me, close quote. This misplaced confession in court brought about his end sentence. And since by making this declaration, he indulged in one of the greatest sins, hence crimes, that of küfür, blasphemy. And as a result, his execution was ordered by the Sultan. He was thus condemned to death, not because of being drunk or being violent, but because of blasphemy. Such a serious punishment for Mehmet here is striking when contrasted with the ruling issued by the Sheikh al-Islam Ebu Suud Efendi, one of the most well-known and Orthodox Sunni Hanafi scholars of the 16th century, on the validity of divorce when intoxicated. Ebu Suud was asked whether it will be legally valid or not if a man divorced his wife after consuming opium and drinking boza, an alcoholic beverage made up of fermented millet and barley, when he was in a state of akıl zahir, absence of reason. Ebu Suud's answer to this question resonated heavily with Abu Hanifa's ruling about drunkenness. He ruled that such divorce could not be valid if the husband, I quote, did not know earth and sky when he divorced his wife. In the light of this ruling, one might have expected that the authorities in Amasya would have adopted a similar approach to Mehmet's declaration uttered in a state of intoxication. The fact that they did not might lead one to suggest that what lay behind his conviction was the desire of the authorities to get rid of troublesome Silahdar Mehmet, who was threatening the order of the town, and hence his drunken statement was used against him despite the fact that he was in a state of akıl zahir, absence of reason. In conclusion, court cases from early modern Istanbul demonstrate the merging of imbibing alcohol with the state of drunkenness, in contrast to the ruling of Abu Hanifa, for whom drunkenness required a state of being unable to differentiate sky from earth or man from woman. They also indicate a pragmatic approach to conviction in cases where a greater offense had been committed, but for which proof was lacking. In such cases, the court was able to convict on the lesser charge of being drunk, a charge proved merely by the scent of wine on the accused's breath. Finally, the impact of alcohol could either spare an individual from the consequences of an action undertaken while intoxicated, in the case of divorce, in accordance with the ruling of Ebu Suud Efendi, could have no bearing on the punishment in the case of the state's death sentence applied to Mehmet by the authorities in Amasya. Thank you.